Hello, guys. Today we're gonna talk about a huge problem that is plaguing American cities and American workers specifically. Picture this: you're working 40 hours a week, but your paycheck barely covers rent, let alone groceries or doctor visits. That's the reality for millions of Americans trapped by a federal minimum wage stuck at $7.25 an hour. So today I'm gonna break down why we must raise and index the minimum wage to inflation to slash poverty, to shrink income inequality and prevent wage loss, and ultimately in the end save potentially billions in taxes. So stay tuned and be ready to see how we could transform this life. Meet a worker called Anna. She's a Domino's worker from Pennsylvania, scraping by on $8.50 an hour. She told Vox in 2021 it's completely impossible to live on $8.50. Anna herself works two jobs, yet she can't afford basic needs. Her story isn't unique, and she might have made some bad decisions to even become in this position, or she might have not. It's completely RNG in this aspect. But it's a harsh reality that for millions of low-wage workers across America, the federal minimum wage, unchanged since 2009, fails to keep up with rising costs. Inflation surged during the COVID-20 pandemic, pushing prices higher while wages stayed flat, coupled on with government stimulus in the form of unemployment checks. So, right now we have high inflation and not the best job market, very tight job market. The crisis of dignity and survival that we have right now is in which workers don't have the security they need to be able to afford basic necessities to lift themselves out of bad positions. Cutting government spending. Raising the minimum wage to even $15 could save taxpayers billions. Why? The Economic Policy Institute in 2021 estimated that increasing the minimum wage would reduce government spending on public assistance like SNAP and Medicaid by $13.4 to $31 billion. Why is this? Well, it's common sense. The decrease in government assistance would be because people wouldn't need the money because the private employers would be giving them the money instead of the government. So basically the burden that we have and this economic system will be shifted from the public or government side to the private sides. We also see that from researchers, specifically from UC Berkeley in 2015, found that over half of public assistance spending goes to working families whose employers pay poverty wages. Now you might be wondering what are poverty wages? Poverty wages is when a wage is too low to actually meet the basic necessities a person can or has to use to actually survive. Basically wages that are on the poverty or below poverty line. So imagine directing those billions to schools or infrastructure instead of subsidizing corporations like Walmart. It's not about cutting aid, it's about ensuring workers earn enough to stand on their own, and we know how that would go. Bridging the income gap. The minimum wage isn't just about survival, it's about fairness. In the 1950s and 60s, it was about 44 to 56% of the average wage, but today it's a mere 31%. The lowest in 60 years, according to the Economic Policy Institute in 2006. This gap fuels income inequality, widening the chasm between CEOs and frontline workers. A 1993 study by Card Kruger on New Jersey fast food industry showed that rising minimum wage didn't lead to job losses. Costs were actually passed to consumers. Although you might not like inflation, it's better to have the workers keep their employment while also making more. We, instead of having workers being paid a lot, we just outsource that to different countries like China, Vietnam, India, where workers paid significantly lower, and we basically subsidize our poor or cheap costs by making people in other countries do the work for significantly less. It's a picture of society where hard work guarantees a decent life and not a struggle. We understand that this is possibly caused by greed and just the mechanics of the U.S. dollar's strength. So we know that higher wages narrow the divide, giving low wages a fair shot at the American dream. Lifting millions out of poverty. A $15 minimum wage could lift millions out of poverty. The Congressional Budget Office reported in 2019 that this would push many low-income families above the poverty line. A 2022 work study found that 3 million workers might face job losses, but 7 million would escape poverty. In my eyes, that's a massive net gain. Even a Nobel laureate, Joseph Stiglitz, argued in 2014 that the Congressional Budget Office overstated the job loss risk and understated the benefits. Think of the families that are no longer forced to choose between food and rent, or parents able to afford school supplies. This isn't a handout, it's more of a hands up that rewards work with a livable wage, because exploitation is the alternative, and we know what happens to societies when people become extremely poor. Protecting wages means indexing it to inflation. Once we temporarily rise the wages through nominal terms, the problem is that inflation is always kept at 2%, meaning your wages would lose real value eventually over time. Meaning that in the end we'd get back to the same problem. This would be fixed by just indexing it to inflation, because what else is our alternative? We have wages decrease continuously, and the whole concept of Congress raising minimum wage manually, it's very inefficient, as the country is very politically divided and it's very hard to even increase wages overall. It's seen as a very left-wing idea, which seems to be the case. And also people might say wage indexes might cause more problems. The Economic Policy Institute noted in 2006 that indexing workers' wages protects living standards. In 2016, Upjohn Study Institute found that index wages cause minimal inflation compared to large one-time hikes, with prices rising 0.36% for a 10% wage increase. States like Washington have indexed their wages successfully, avoiding economic chaos. Widely, workers face political gridlock. Indexation is an automatic stabilizer, just like how taxes are. It keeps wages safe and keeps up with the cost of living, and then we would have no need to actually debate raising wages. Addressing the critics. Critics warn that raising the minimum wage spikes unemployment and crushes small businesses. But evidence tells a different story. A 2013 study by Schmidt found that modest wage increases don't significantly cut jobs. They boost productivity and reduce turnover. A 2019 study from Oxford by Singas showed no decline in low wage jobs over 5 years after wage hikes. It's hard to even argue morally for a place where we prioritize profits over people. It's sugar-coated to make it sound like it's not the case, but that is the real problem that exists. Workers like Jordan, a dollar store employee from Vox's 2021 report, works through medical debt and spinal headaches on $7.25 an hour. Is it fair to let businesses thrive while workers suffer? Adaptation, not exploitation, is the answer. If you're outraged that millions of workers work full-time and live in poverty, we have to all collectively have our voices heard, whether that is through protesting or having our congressmen or women listen to our voices. A vision for fairness. So protesting and other actions to help guide public policy is crucial. Raising the federal minimum wage and indexing it to inflation isn't just a policy, it's a moral imperative. It cuts government spending, shrinks income inequality, lifts millions out of poverty, and protects workers from wage erosion. By tying wages to local median incomes, we can tailor the solution to each state's economy, ensuring fairness without a one-size-fits-all approach. Imagine an America where no full-time worker lives in poverty, where hard work guarantees a decent life, so a chance to rebuild an economy that values people over profits. So, from the main point I want to say is that all of these changes are very left-wing. It doesn't mean it's wrong. There's also arguments that can be said for the other side of this political spectrum. But in order to actually get to a certain change, we need to look at its race centrist position, which is not what I did in this video. I just wanted to inform you guys about the arguments for increasing minimum wage, and that may come off as biased. I'm willing to argue for something that's right-wing in the future, just to equal the playing field. Thank you guys for listening.